Am I Not a Ghost? Is a research project by a team from the Arts et Métiers Institute of Technology. This work aims to study the impact of the coherence between the avatar and possible interactions on perceived embodiment and plausibility by leveraging affordances in virtual reality. Immersive virtual environments allow users to evolve in a digitally created space. It is common to experience such spaces through a virtual representation that is called an avatar. Avatars are the vessels of users' agency in the virtual space, as they allow them to interact with virtual objects, but also with other users connected to the same environment. Diving into virtual reality is not trivial from the user's perspective. Users are enveloped by the system's immersion, which is defined as its objective quality to deliver an inclusive, extensive, surrounding, and vivid illusion of virtual environment to a participant. Being immersed by the technology causes a subjective and proportionate response known as presence, or the sense of being there in the virtual environment. Also, embodying an avatar may cause the emergence of a sense where the properties of a virtual body are processed as if they were those of the biological one, namely the sense of embodiment. Presence and embodiment are commonly referred to as VR qualia. Just like in the real world, users in virtual environments may perceive possibilities for actions that are called affordances. Therefore, beside eliciting a sense of embodiment, avatars may likely suggest possibilities for actions and interactions with objects in a virtual environment, what could be called bodily affordances. Past research from Joy et al. Demonstrated that manipulating a virtual hand representation may have an impact on perceived affordances. Building on these results, could a ghost-like appearance suggest to users that they can go through any kind of furniture? And if so, what would happen if it turns out the system implementation does not allow it? This leads us to consider the objective congruence and the resulting perceived plausibility of avatar-related interactions. The concept of plausibility was introduced by Slater and colleagues as one of the two components of the sense of presence. The subjective experience of plausibility would be framed by the objective congruence of events. Latoshik and Vienrich recently proposed the congruence and plausibility model, in which plausibility is more of a higher-order qualia that would condition the experience of other qualia, like presence and the sense of embodiment. Therefore, if the avatar can signify possibilities for actions that are not supported by the system, namely false affordances, users may perceive them as unplausible, which may in turn negatively affect major VR qualia, as suggested by the CAP model. In this context, we proposed a methodology aiming at answering the following research question. May interaction possibilities incoherent with the virtual hand's appearance impair the experience of being embodied in an avatar and immersed in a virtual environment? Before running this experiment, it appeared critical to assess the virtual hand representations that would suggest the expected affordance. A preliminary study was consequently carried out through an online questionnaire to assess the perceived affordances of 3 different virtual hands. The default Oculus hand shader, a gloved hand, and a ghost-like shader were considered. The results revealed that the default Oculus hand shader was ambiguous compared to the 2 other conditions. As expected, the ghost hands perceived to be the most likely to go through the desk, while the gloved hands were perceived as the most likely to collide. Consequently, these quantitative analyses combined with a qualitative analysis from participants' comments gives us confidence that the virtual hands we designed provide suitable affordances for the following experimental investigations. Following our preliminary results, 2 experimental studies were conducted in the same virtual environment by way of a MetaQuest 3 headset. For consistency with the hand representations we were evaluating, the action took place in an old manner. Immersed in a VR scenario, participants used hand tracking capabilities to reassemble 10 enchanted objects that split into a spectral entity and a physical shell. The first study was designed to observe potential affordance effects in a context of unconstrained interactions. The second study aimed at understanding if manipulating the congruence between the perceived grabbing affordance and the actual grabbing interaction could impact the sense of embodiment and presence. In the free interaction study, all objects were grabbable, and both hand representations would collide with the objects as well as the environment. The study aimed to determine if participants' grabbing behavior aligned with their hand representation, specifically whether they would grab tangible objects with the physical glove and spectral objects with the ghost hand. The second study focused on understanding how users respond to a constrained interaction that conflicts with the action capabilities suggested by their virtual body's appearance. Unlike the previous study, participants could not freely grab the tangible or spectral entities. For instance, being able to grab a tangible object with the glove is considered congruent, whereas being able to grab a spectral object with the glove is incongruent. It explored whether false affordances would negatively affect perceived plausibility, presence, and embodiment. We measured plausibility with the Virtual Human Plausibility Scale, embodiment with the Virtual Embodiment Questionnaire, and presence with the I-Group Presence Questionnaire. Objective metrics like object interaction timestamps and hand collisions were collected. Semi-structured interviews were conducted following the unconstrained interaction study. The unconstrained interaction study showed that participants reported significantly higher ownership toward the gloved hand. More importantly, it showed that participants did not grab more objects corresponding to their hand appearance, leading to the rejection of our first hypothesis. During the semi-structured interviews, participants reported that they recognized their virtual hand appearance as being a ghost or a glove. However, some said they did not pay attention to their hands while grabbing objects. Moreover, they reported that they rather focused on the goal whether the interaction was congruent or not. This indicates that they accepted rather well the interactions as proposed by the VR scenario, which may have primed over avatar-related affordances. Concerning the constrained interaction study, the manipulation of the objective congruence failed to affect the perceived plausibility. Deeper analyses showed that the counterbalancing of the congruence conditions failed. We acknowledged this by introducing a new variable accounting for the congruence condition order. We observed significant interactions between the order and congruence variables for the prehension failure count, perceived plausibility, and embodiment. We observed that switching from a congruent situation to an incongruent one across 2 consecutive VR sessions caused a significant increase in prehension failures, accompanied with a drop in perceived plausibility. We also observed that such transition caused a significant drop in perceived change in the body schema. Moreover, it appeared that switching from an incongruent situation to a congruent one caused a significant drop in perceived agency and body ownership. Finally, our analyses showed that both subscales of the Virtual Human Plausibility Questionnaire are consistently and positively correlated with agency and ownership across both user studies. Furthermore, they are also consistently and positively correlated with general presence, spatial presence, and realness subscales. These correlations tend to confirm the claim that plausibility is related to other VR qualia. As takeaways, the selected hand representations did not trigger the expected interaction behaviors. This may be explained by other processes prevailing over bodily affordances, like the task goal, or the fact users accepted rather well whatever interaction was proposed in VR. Also, manipulating the objective congruence through possible interactions across 2 consecutive VR sessions proved to cause breaks in plausibility and embodiment, but not in presence. Our participants may have accepted the available interactions as being the rules of the VR world during the first session. Their behavior persisted in the second session where the congruence was changed, and this may have resulted in the observed ruptures of qualia. This result has critical design implications for repeated exposures in VR. Finally, we unveiled strong correlations between plausibility and embodiment, which constitutes, to the best of our knowledge, a first evidence of the relationship between these qualia, and that breaks in plausibility may be related to breaks in sense of embodiment.